It is undeniable that the Big 12 is the premier basketball conference in the country. Did the Big 12 actually help BYU with their draw of their conference opponents for Keving Young's first season? We're digging into that on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who we like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but all summer long, FanDuel is cooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. That's something for everybody every single day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. All right, let's dig in and start off on the BYU basketball front. The Big 12 announced the conference matrix with regards to conference opponents for the upcoming men's and women's basketball seasons. We're going to focus on the men's basketball side of things for this conversation. And Keving Young has done a marvelous job with this BYU basketball program. I've crowed about it time and time again on this podcast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But when the conference matrix came out and announced which teams BYU would be facing home and home, which teams they'd face at home only, and also the teams they would go on the road against only, I actually came away thinking there is a pretty darn good chance that BYU basketball got a major break relative to the strength of the Big 12 overall. Let's acknowledge that fact. It is the best basketball conference in the country by a country mile. It is absolutely insane, the depth and the talent and just the overall nature. It's just a beast of a schedule. But BYU, relative to some of the other teams in the conference, I thought got a nice draw with regards to their opponents. Let's start off with the home and away. So the home and home schedules. All three of the Mountain Time Zone teams BYU will face home and home. That is Arizona, Arizona State, and obviously their arch rival, Utah. The Holy War will go back to a home and home format. That's a win for BYU. Relatively short travel. Obviously, Arizona and the McHale Center is a tough place to play, but the last time BYU played there, some guy named Jimmer Fredette set the record for most points scored in a game in the McHale Center. It was like 49 points. One of the seminal performances of Jimmer Fredette's career, and that's saying something because we all know how that played out, but an incredible performance he put on against the Wildcats. They will also, speaking of BYU, have Cincinnati home and home. They had some really good battles against the Bearcats last year. And then West Virginia, BYU will go to Morgantown, and West Virginia will come to Provo for literally the first time ever in West Virginia's history. Long travel on both sides of things, but you can endure that. The fact that it's really the only long trip. You have to go to Cincinnati. It is in the Eastern time zone, so it's two time zones, but it's not nearly the same distance traveled to play against the Bearcats. So that's your home and away, the home and home slate. And I think it's very advantageous to have the Wildcats, the Sun Devils, and the Utes on a home and home basis. Now, home only games: Baylor, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. Four of the best teams, I think, in the league upcoming. Speaking of the Baylor Bears, the Kansas Jayhawks, Kansas State Wildcats, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders, in addition to Oklahoma State, who's going to be rebuilding. Oklahoma State will be picked, I think, 16th out of 16 teams in the preseason poll. If they're not, they're 15. But getting those four, the big four, at home, that's major plus for BYU, because Kansas coming to BYU for the first time since 1960. The funny thing is, the last time Kansas played in Provo, they played games in the Smith Fieldhouse. It predated the Marriott Center by a full 12 years or some such. But getting the Jayhawks, the Wildcats, the Bears, the Red Raiders in Provo, that is going to give BYU a leg up. We all know the magic of the Marriott Center and what the Rock brings and just the crowd. I am ecstatic to say that we have renewed the 2 seats we had for our podcast listeners for the upcoming season. We'll be rewarding those of you, and I guess this is a shameless plug, join our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. We're sending people from our Insiders Group to these games. That's the only way you can get access to the seats we have. So if you have aspirations of seeing BYU basketball against Kansas, Kansas State, etc., join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Let's get a plug in there. Now, the away games also, there's obviously a role to play here, but you go to Colorado, to Houston, to Iowa State, to TCU, to UCF. Well, here's the deal. Colorado, tough, but going to be rebuilding under Tad Boyle. They just had Tristan Da Silva as well as Cody Williams drafted in the NBA draft. And they have one other guy taken in the second round, if I recall correctly. Houston retooling a little bit, but still be very formidable. Iowa State, tough place to play. Remember, BYU had them on the ropes and then found a way to just incredibly lose that game, it felt like, out there in Ames. But then going to TCU and UCF, those are not insurmountable. Really, the only away game on that docket to me that screams, wow, that's going to be a toughie, is Houston. Going to Houston is just, it's incredibly tough. And the Cougars against the Cougars had some pretty good battles this past season, but had a good battle this past season, I should say. I think it was only the one home game that BYU got them in Provo. But regardless, it is an incredible slate of games for BYU. And it makes me think that BYU, the hope is that they can improve on a 5th place finish. Well, if this roster is as cracked up as it should be, because you add talent to the returning core of players. I think Dallin Hall, Richie Saunders, Husseini Traore, those guys, that core, that nucleus that remains at BYU from last year's squad. And then you supplement that with Keba Keita, Yegor Denham, also involving Cannon Catchings. I just go down that list. The talent, Elijah Crawford, Brody Kozlowski, Mawat Mag. This is a team, and the way the schedule, just the way it, we'll see how it lays out, obviously, because that's a big question in and of itself. When you have to go to these places, what the road to home disparity is at times, you're playing 3 straight road games. That stuff will come in time. We don't know the dates on these games, but the way the matrix played out for BYU is a major plus for BYU's chances of finishing at least in the top half of this conference. And if you're the top half of the conference this year, yeah, a 6th seed feels like it might be the floor for BYU if they can finish in the top half. The Big 12 looks absolutely loaded, and BYU had a very, very good season a year ago. And if Keving Young is as good as I believe he is going to be as BYU men's basketball coach, this is going to be a really, really fun season. And they got a major gift from the schedule makers at the Big 12. Because like I said, the toughest, it feels like the toughest games in the one-offs, speaking of just either home or away, the one time you face opponents, BYU got 4 of the toughest teams they're going to face at home. And really, and I don't mean any disrespect to Iowa State and the like, Colorado, etc. But really the only one-off road game that scares me to death, I think you can write down as a loss, is Houston. The home and home slate, obviously, you have the regional rivalries with the Arizona Wildcats, Arizona State, and Utah. That's awesome. This is a really, really stout schedule. Let's reiterate that. The Big 12 is going to be a dogfight literally every game. And the team that comes out on top in the end of it is going to be like the walking wounded. And it feels like a lot of teams are going to be like that. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU got a very advantageous schedule just with regards to the home and road disparity, it feels like. And that should bode well for year 1 of the Keving Young tenure. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip over to BYU football. The good news continues to roll in for BYU when it comes to the recruiting. They got another commitment, this one beating out 3 fellow Big 12 teams to earn a commitment from Andrew Williams. Who is this young man? What does he bring into BYU? We're digging into that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at eBay. Now, eBay Motors, excuse me, I apologize. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive, my friends. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance right now. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. No matter what you're into, speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And of course, eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to remind you guys that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's also now available on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. And the best part about it is Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7. covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus all of our national shows covering every league as well. Find Locked On Sports Today available now wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube, or check it out on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app right away. All right, BYU football, the good times roll on as BYU lands a commitment from Andrew Williams, 6'7", 6'8" offensive tackle prospect out of the Midwest. And the thing about this is BYU, that official visit weekend they had this past weekend, has paid bigger dividends than I could have ever imagined. Remember, I talked last Friday, a week ago this time, talking about the fact that I felt like BYU needed to get a handful of commitments. They had 14 official visits going on simultaneously. I felt like if BYU had pulled out 4 to 5 commitments out of that weekend, I would have considered it a success. Is it 7 that they have committed? So half of the guys who made that official visit, that shows that the whole adage, always be closing, BYU's doing an incredible job once they get athletes on campus. BYU's campus, the mountains, the setting it's in, the academics, a lot of it speaks for itself. The biggest challenge, it feels like, for BYU football recruiting really is convincing young men to look past maybe some of their preconceived notions of what Provo and BYU are all about and just come check it out. Come to Utah. See what we've got. If you like it, great. If you don't, no problem. Move on. We can part ways. It's not that big of a deal. But BYU continues to win, and Andrew Williams adds to is just another solid addition to this class. An 87 rating from our friends at 24/7 Sports. The composite rating, speaking of the other ratings from the other services, downgrade him slightly to 86.52 on his rating there. But this is a guy that if you look at his highlight reels, you look at his body physique, 6'7", 6'8", 275 pounds, you can't help but conjure up images of Blake Freeland. And I'm not the only person that's saying this. Trust me, I think Jeff Hansen from 24/7 Sports talked about it. I've seen many comparisons on social media. But Andrew Williams and Blake Freeland appear to have a really, really unique connection just because of the body types here. Remember, Blake Freeland famously never played offensive line before entering BYU. He played quarterback. He played punter. He was a defensive end. He was a tight end. He played essentially every position on the football field that he could play without playing offensive line. But BYU said, you know what, you're going to be an offensive tackle for us. And he came to BYU, picked up the position extremely quickly. Remember, he started as a freshman against Boise State in that famous win over the 16th ranked Broncos in the rain. Remember Baylor Romney starting at quarterback, Blake Freeland making his first career start at tackle. Really incredible story. And now he's the starting left tackle for the Indianapolis Colts. I saw him on Monday playing barefoot the back nine of the BYU Media Golf Tournament. He and his team, I think it was Baylor Romney, funny enough, Hank Tui Pelotu, and Dax Milne were playing alongside Blake. My team finished 12 under in that tournament, tied for second. The team that had Blake Freeland playing barefoot for the back nine finished 14 under. He was mashing, absolutely mashing drives. Andrew Williams gives off some major vibes of Blake Freeland, and that's a home run if BYU gets anywhere near what Blake Freeland was for the Cougars and what he is now in Andrew Williams. His commitment is huge because, as I mentioned before, we talked about our friends at eBay Motors. He picked BYU over competing offers from Big 12 schools in Iowa State, Kansas, and Kansas State. That's big. BYU's beating out fellow conference mates for a guy of this caliber. And the other thing about this is, I remember a lot of us, we talked during the offseason when it looked like there was a chance BYU may be able to get Jeff Grimes to return to Provo after he was let go as Baylor's offensive coordinator. Well, he opted to take an offensive coordinator position with Kansas. Well, Kansas offered this kid, and BYU and TJ Woods beat out Jeff Grimes, the sage of BYU's offensive line play, the guy who reignited what BYU offensive line play could look like for Kalani Sitake, and BYU went and beat Kansas out for Andrew Williams. That is a major, major win for BYU. Does he pan out in the end? That is years down the line, but it's good to see BYU going head-to-head with conference mates, Kansas. And Kansas State's going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12 this season. They beat out the Wildcats. They beat out the Jayhawks. And also beat out Iowa State. This is a really, really solid recruiting win for BYU. Don't get it construed that a three-star talent is something to crow about. It is something to talk about because BYU, there's a lot of people out there, there's naysayers that say that BYU can't win recruiting battles at the Power 4 level. Folks, that argument, that diatribe needs to die a fiery death. BYU is competing and winning recruiting battles head-to-head against Power 4 foes. As I said, it feels like in many respects, once kids come on campus in Provo, check out what BYU has to offer, sees the facilities that BYU continues to upgrade around the football program, sees what the university looks like, sees what the setting is in Provo, and just sees everything that Brigham Young University has to offer, and obviously everything in the surrounding area. A lot of kids are like, wow, this is awesome. I want to be a part of this. And it really feels like that is half of the battle for BYU. If they get kids here to Provo, it feels like they're like, oh, okay, I get it. The magic, it's real. So really cool to see this. The other part about this is Andrew Williams is from Kirksville, Missouri. So he is right in the heart of Big 12 country, or the Midwest, as it were. I know that Missouri's in the SEC, speaking of the University of Missouri, but it's still awesome to see BYU being able to go to the Midwest and recruit a kid. Now, as I understand it, he is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so there is obviously that connection with BYU. But to go into the proverbial Midwest, take a guy right out of there and beat out 3 fellow conference mates, that's a huge, huge deal for BYU to get this win. And the thing about it is, if you watch kind of his recruiting profile and how it's evolved this spring, he is really emerging on the scene, and much like many of these commits this week, apologies for that gaffe, is that a lot of these are guys that are emerging right now, and BYU's pouncing on them before they really, I guess, blow up on a national stage. We'll see how things continue to develop here for a guy like Andrew Williams, but I really like this pickup. TJ Woods has got a type of offensive lineman he wants. He wants tall guys, long levers, the ability to be good athletes, and that's exactly what Andrew Williams is for BYU. So really, really good week for BYU football on the recruiting front. I know that BYU basketball has been taking the headlines. When you bring in international talents like Jaeger Denham, I get that that's going to obviously overshadow some of what BYU football is doing, because a 4-star talent, which, by the way, Jaeger Denham, if he's a 4-star talent, what in the world are we doing here? But that's beside the point. I get that there's the flash and pizzazz and the overall thought that BYU basketball is beating the brakes off of BYU football on the recruiting front, but BYU football, once again, I reiterate this line a lot on this podcast. Kalani Sitake's track record says that BYU will bring in 3-star talents. That's the vast majority of their recruiting classes in his run as BYU head coach. But frankly, look at the track record with a lot of those guys that are the quote-unquote 3-star talents. They end up producing at a 4 or a 5-star level during their time at BYU, and that's really, really a positive for the Cougars. They have to be a developmental program. They have to be a program that brings guys in that may not, have the, the overall star potential that some of these recruiting services think they have, but BYU see something in them, and then they bring them in, they polish them up, and make them exactly what the star could and should be. And that's what BYU's whole philosophy has been and should continue to be. There's a point at some point, if BYU starts winning at a high level, you'll see them start to bring in more 4, maybe a potential 5-star talent to BYU. But for the time being, continue to bring in emerging talents like an Andrew Williams, capitalize on their God-given gifts, and benefit thereby. That's the thing about this is, yes, you like to have 4-star talents. You'd like to have 5-star guys coming to Provo. Give it time, and if you win, those will come. But in the meantime, get good talent, bring the best out of it, get good coaches around them, develop them, let them become the best versions that they can, and benefit from that. It becomes a self-feeding cycle if you do it the right way. And I think Kalani Sitake and the BYU football program, they are building this thing. It's fun to see them doing what they're doing, and really get guys to Provo. That feels like if you get somebody that may be on the fence about what BYU is, and they have questions about the honor code or the academic side of things, or maybe the prestige, whatever the issue is, it feels like if you get them to Provo, just say, trust us, come and check it out. Those guys get to Provo and they're looking around at BYU like, all right, I get it. And I think any of you that have been to Provo and have attended there, I grew up a stone's throw away. I grew up in Orem, Utah. BYU is literally my proverbial backyard growing up. It's an incredible place. It is a jewel. It is an absolute jewel, and BYU needs to recruit to that more often, it feels like, than they do at times. So congratulations to Andrew Williams. Congratulations to TJ Woods, Aaron Roderick, Kalani Sitake, and the rest of the BYU football program. It has been an awesome week. It has been an incredible week for BYU football. Don't get it misconstrued. The Cougars are doing work on the recruiting front, and they're winning big recruiting battles. All right, we will finish up today's show with your questions. I threw it out to our Locked On Cougars Insider group, what questions they had for me. We'll answer as many as we can in the time remaining as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, all of us love sports, but I'll be honest, I love sports probably more than most of you because I literally do it on a daily basis. It's my job. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs have been winding down, my friends, we get fewer games, and if the sports aren't sports like I want them to, the best part is FanDuel fills the void. They keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream of any bet I want when I'm in the mood to have some fun with regards to sports. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. You want to capitalize on BYU basketball and think they could overcome 55-1 odds to win it all? You think BYU football can overcome an over-under win total of 4.5 wins? Take advantage of it now and do it with our friends at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to make the most out of your summer right now. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Had a little bit of a glitch there, so I hope this gets through. But nonetheless, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you guys are all doing well out there on this Friday. If you've not done so already, please join our Locked On Cougars Insider group. Join us. We're having a lot of fun. You're getting updates if you're a part of it from me that literally comes to your phone in the form of a text message. And it's a really, really fun way to do it. I'm just pulling this up here so I can get the questions that I need to answer coming out real quick. Got to type in a two-factor authentication code. That's always good when you're recording the show and it decides it needs that code. But hey, let's get to it. So join us today, by the way, in the Locked On Cougars Insider group. Click the link in the show notes below. Join us today and have some fun along the way. All right, great questions here. Let's get to as many of them as we can, and we'll do this pretty quick. Andrew Lida, how are you feeling about BYU's 2025 class ranking? I'm speaking of recruiting, I believe. Can we sneak by Utah if Pay and Dunn sign? If they get both Austin Pay and Aaron Dunn, BYU is going to rocket past Utah for the time being because those are two legitimate, we're talking 4 potential 5-star type talents right in BYU's backyard. One in Spanish Fork, the other in Highland. They're both in Utah Valley. Win those recruiting battles, and yeah, BYU is going to sneak by Utah for the time being. Now, there's still a long race to go here, but it's really cool to see that. Bryce says this: are there any major 4-star recruits we're waiting on for football? Austin Pay and Aaron Dunn. And it's a big thing is you watching those two names. There's always names that pop up between now and then. There'll be guys that blow up this fall in their high school seasons. That'll be 4-star talents that I'm sure that BYU will be in on. And then there's been a similar question. Bryce asked this question, and any word on how they're going to fill the final basketball scholarship for Keving Young? So far as I know, BYU has plans to take the best player available. That is the thought process. But ideally, it'd be a big man. We're talking a 6'10", 6'11", 7-footer. And the thought is they may have to look at Europe to find that guy. Now, as I said, it is the best player available. If it ends up being a guard or a swingman, I don't think Keving Young and the BYU staff will fret that. I personally think getting a big man is smart, just simply to have a guy to throw out there against some of these bigger centers you're going to see in the Big 12. I love Keba Keita. I love Fousseyni Traore, but the front court depth for BYU, it's thin. There's no mincing words about it. It's absolutely thin. Donovan Gillies asked, is there one more roster spot left? Is there another recruit that's supposed to commit? Did he commit yet? Not yet. There's been no commitment, but as I understand it, BYU is searching high and low, but the main focus, last I heard, was looking at the European ranks to find a guy to bring in. All right. What is your case for each of the quarterbacks? Retzlaff, Bohanon, and Hillstead. This comes from Taylor. That's a good question. Our case for the quarterbacks, I'll make this brief. Retzlaff. We saw flashes of greatness in him last season. Yes, they were offset by absolute moments of backbreaking plays. Nobody, and I mean nobody, yours truly included, can get that 100-yard pick 6 against Oklahoma out of their head. That should have been a touchdown. It should have put BYU ahead, and it felt like if the Cougars pulled ahead in that game, they were going to win that game. You have that backbreaking play, and it really has hurt about the Retzlaff perception. And the other thing is he's 0-4, but there have been flashes. When he played at his top shelf level against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, you saw, okay, this kid can ball. We'll see what happens. Case for Bohanon. He is a leader personified. He connects with everybody in the program. I had a conversation with an individual on Monday who pointed exactly to that. There is nobody on BYU's roster that Gerry Bohanon cannot reach. And I know that sounds bad for Jake Retzlaff. I'm not saying that Jake Retzlaff is a bad leader by any stretch of the imagination, but the way that Gerry Bohanon has come in and in seemingly a short span of time. Remember, he got to BYU in January and we're in June, and he's just ingratiated himself with his teammates. He is a leader, and he's a rocked up 220, 230 pounds. Like, he looks the part. In another realm, he might be a running back. He is a great looking athlete. I really love what Gerry Bohanon brings. And if that shoulder holds up, he's going to be in contention. The last one you asked about is Hillstead. McKay Hillstead, absolute baller when healthy. I called his first high school start. I never expected to have that on my resume, but I have that on my resume with KSL Sports Rewind. And he was dynamic then, and he stayed that way his entire high school career, and he's had moments of it of absolute brilliance at Utah State. When he is healthy, there are very few people like him at the quarterback position, but he's got to be healthy. That is the major question mark for him. Does that help or answer your question? I don't know. Also, another question for Taylor. If you could upgrade anything else at LES, what would it be? He said, I would add boosts to the other side and use the south parking lot to turn it into a huge club for boosters. All great questions. My overall request right now is upgrade the suite status. BYU wants to make more money. The suites, you got to upgrade those. Find a way to build more of them if at all possible, but upgrade the ones you currently have. They're not bad by any means, but they are Spartan compared to many of the others out there at the Power 4 level. Upgrade that. Be cool to see the South End Zone be a club for boosters, but I just don't see BYU necessarily wanting to have major tailgating scene near the stadium for whatever reason. I think tailgating should be a big part of this, but BYU wants to park it a half mile down the road. You guys know where it's at. It's down by, actually more towards the practice facility, and it's closer to BYU's SAB than it is LES, but nonetheless, that'd be something to do. You talk about putting boosts on the other side. I can tell you this much. There have been studies done by BYU with regards to potentially putting a press box on the east stands, but let's just put it this way. There are logistical concerns with regards to the soil and everything that would be required to build on that, on top of the stands that are already there. There's something about soil compaction rates and stuff that is far beyond my knowledge base, because I did not study that in college, but that is something to pay attention to. Danny Drew, how many first rounders in 2025 does BYU men's basketball have? Ooh, I'm going to say the over-under is 1.5, and I will take currently the under on that. I would like to say that it's going to be Jaeger Denham as well as Cannon Catchings. I think Jaeger Denham is a lock to be a first-rounder. Cannon Catchings, his stock has been fluctuating a bit with regards to early looks at next year's draft, but if he's as good as he's cracked up to be, he easily could be a first-rounder, but I think the over-under is 1.5, and I will say right now, I'm taking the under, just the one for Jaeger Denham in first-rounder, but if you want to say about overall draft, if Cannon Catchings wants to go next year, I think he gets drafted. It just may be as a second-round pick. Let's see. Jonathan Erickson, we've had a lot of offensive line commits over the last little bit. How many more can we take? I think BYU, speaking of TJ Woods, will take as many as he feels like he needs to fill out and get the right offensive lineman that he wants in his program. And frankly, there's a thing called the transfer portal for a reason. He will push guys out. And I know that sounds bad, but it's the modern era of college football. Everybody else is doing it. BYU is no different. So keep an eye on that. It's something to pay attention to. In your opinion, which basketball, this comes from Matthew. In your opinion, which basketball home games are going to be on ESPN or FS1 next year? A lot. Kansas State, those home games, Utah, those home games are going to be featured heavily. And Kansas, obviously, it feels like it's a no-doubter. There's going to be a bevy of them. Now, BYU has to hold up their end of the bargain. They have to win games. If they're winning games, they will be featured prominently. And with some of the opponents coming to the Marriott Center, yeah, you can expect that they will get top billing on some of the networks, so long as they're winning at a pretty decent clip. All right, and then the final two questions here are a little more off topic, but I love these questions. First one comes from Corbin. When are we going to fire Berhalter? Speaking of the U.S. men's national team soccer, many of you know that I cover RSL for my station, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm an aficionado of the U.S. men's national team. When are we going to fire Berhalter? Can we do it today? I don't think Berhalter is the answer for what the U.S. men's national team needs and or wants. And with the World Cup coming here in 2026, after that debacle last night against Panama, I would fire him today and find a new coach. That's just me. I don't I just don't think he's right for the U.S. men's national team. I'm willing to debate anybody on that, and we can take that offline if you want to debate that a little bit further. But yeah, fire him today and move on. Find somebody else. The U.S. is in danger of falling flat on their face in front of the world when they host the World Cup in 2026 if he is still leading the program at that point. That's just my opinion. Final question, and I love this question because I love this TV series. Who is your favorite character from Friday Night Lights, the TV show, and why is it Tim Riggins? Coming from Andy. Tim Riggins is a great choice, Andy, and I love you to death. I got to say, Smash Williams, that is my guy. I love me some Tim Riggins. Trust me, Tim Riggins, Texas forever. I have a FNL shirt that I wear all the time that it's getting old and raggedy. My wife hates it. I need to order a new one. I love that series. I only own one TV series, the entire series on DVD. It's Friday Night Lights. Now, I know it's on streaming services, and trust me, I watch it fairly often. I've seen the entire series, man. 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many times I've seen, maybe double digits at this point. I love it. But Smash Williams, I got to say, that's kind of my guy, Andy. I know that Tim Riggins is a fan favorite. I get that. And trust me, I love many of those characters in that series, but Smash, there's something about that, the bravado, the brash nature of him as a running back that I connect with for whatever reason. I love me some Smash Williams. So there you go. That's my answer on that one. FNL forever. There's no doubt about that. They should have never ended that series. It should be going today for all I care. All right. That's going to do it for this Friday edition of the show. A big thank you for all those questions. It's a ton of fun. Please join us on Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It is a great time. And we got plans to take it bigger and better as the season draws closer. Next time we reconvene, barring something crazy this weekend, it'll be July, everybody. That means Big 12 Media Days is coming. That means BYU training camp is going to start later this month. Speaking of July, it's coming quick. So get ready for it. And a big thank you as always for your guys' support, of the podcast. It really does mean the world to me that you guys enjoy it as much as you do. I cannot thank you guys enough for being part of it. Thank you once again, as we always say, for making it your first listen of the day. And obviously a big thank you to all of you who are everydayers as well. And until next time, my friends, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.